Good evening. Welcome to the Raymond Select Board meeting for March 10th, 2015. It's come to my attention recently that even though we have spiffy name tags in front of us, that people at home probably can't read those. And so I'd like to start each meeting out by folks introducing themselves, not by spelling their name tag, but actually by saying their name. So Teresa, would you start? Say your full name.
Teresa Sadak.
Sam Gifford.
Lonnie Taylor.
I'm Mike Reynolds.
Don Willard.
All right, thank you. Can I have a motion to accept out-of-town folks to speak at the meeting today?
Moved.
Second.
Those in favor? Thank you. Motion for minutes of the meeting dated February 10th, 2015.
So moved.
Second.
Any suggestions, corrections, deletions, comment? All those in favor? Unanimous? First item under new business is a presentation from the Compensation Study Committee. Ralph Olson, the chair, will present that, and there are other committee members here. The Compensation Study Committee is an ad hoc committee created by the Board of Selectmen in October of 2012. The charge of this committee was to gather and study current compensation numbers offered by neighboring and similarly sized towns, review and compare pay scales and benefit numbers, and present appropriate information to the Select Board to be used in developing schedules and scales. The final report is totally objective, but the committee was not charged in proposing pay scales or schedules. The committee completed its work at the end of 2013. And since that time, we've had illnesses, we've had snowstorms, we've had a whole myriad of scheduling issues to get the final report finally approved and then get it scheduled here tonight. But I am glad that it is being presented tonight, and I want to thank Ralph and the other committee members for being here. Ralph, sorry Ralph, it's all yours.
Yes, many renditions. Just a couple of things to start. First, want to recognize the people that were on the committee. We had Marshall Bullock, Bob Goslin, Dennis Morris, Mike Reynolds, Norma Richards, and Brian Walker. And also to recognize the assistance and work that was done by Nancy Yates and Danielle in not only helping us get information from the various towns, but in doing some collations and things like that. So there's a lot of people that had their hands in there. Just want to reiterate something that Mike had said. The charge to us was not to opine on this, but to gather information and to present, try and put it into some views that could be looked at by the board as far as looking at where we are versus other towns and things like that. So one of the first things that we was done was to just go out as a general standpoint and try and get data from the surrounding towns on various compensation levels, payroll levels, benefit levels, and things like that. Once we had that, that was put into, Nancy had got that put into a spreadsheet for us. We started looking at that a little bit and trying to glean some information from that. Went out with some additional questions to all those towns to try and fill in some of the missing data. Once we got that, we started trying to look at it as from the standpoint of how do we put something together that's going to have some validity as far as looking at comparable from a town to a town or whatever. And part of that got into was, how really do we do that? Is it based on town population? Is it based on town valuation? Is it based on size of staff? Is it based on payroll or whatever? So what we did from that is kind of looked at that, and in the spreadsheet you'll see a number of different sort pages, and it kind of breaks it down under those various groupings, so that we then looked and said, okay, we want to now try and look a little bit more in depth at just a couple of target towns. And we went through a number of iterations on how do we pick the towns that we look at, and we looked both from distance, from town size, from populations and things like that. And then we went out and did some interviews at the towns. But before we got to that point, we actually went in and did interviews with the people in the town to try and get some identification on what actually the jobs were doing in the town, because there's no real true job definitions that exist right now as far as a position does exactly this and that. And some of the things we found out there was the level of cross-training that we have in this town, and then kind of looked at that when we were looking at the other individual towns to see where they were versus in the cross-training, as well as where they were in regards to actual work done by that position, so we could try and get a little bit of data for you on that. And that's on some of those support sheets that go into the actual interviews at the town, what we picked up from there. So as I say, if you look through the various sorts on the sheets, you'll see we've sorted based on health expenses, we've sorted based on payroll expenses, we've tried to sort where we could based on positions and listing that. And as you'll see there are some differences when we get in, if you look at it at the gross level, as far as what a position here may be compensated at versus another town. But you then have to really also look at the detail sheet on the description from that town to tie that together to make sure that you're looking a little bit more closely apples to apples, because there is quite some difference when you get into what a town clerk does here versus what a town clerk does in Standish, what a town clerk does in Casco or Bridgeton or wherever. So when you start to look at that, and one of the big things that came up was the amount of cross-training that we have that is not incumbent in a lot of the other towns. And so as you start looking at that and trying to hang numbers, hang these numbers back against, does it really, if we're showing a 20% differential in a pay rate, is that really the same job, even though it may have the same title? And going forward, and I think, we, as I say, we were not tasked with making overall recommendations, but just from the standpoint of the memos that I've seen come about as far as looking at potential merit pay and things like that, I think one of the big things that needs to get done is some true job descriptions if you're going to do that, so that you can really have something to base on.
Questions for Ralph before I ask other committee members if they'd like to add to it?
I just want to say thanks. I mean, just reading over this, you can't just sit down and read over it once, because it's so much information, and you have to go back and look at it again and go back and then, like you said, compare it to what the job titles are. So thank you, because there's a lot. It's a lot. So you guys did a lot of work, and thank you for that.
Ralph, you said you can't make any can't come to any conclusions on this, or you weren't.
We weren't tasked to make it.
I didn't assign you to do that,
Right.
but you make observations naturally on this. For example, is there an observation on town clerk that you made?
Town clerks inherently, if you look at that, ours are at the lower end of the pay scale than some of the surrounding areas. And if you couple that with some of the cross training and the tasks that they take on that are not incumbent at some of the others, then there is some disparity there. But as I say, you really have to look at it, the two pieces together. You can't just look at that gross number, because without then, I mean, if you take, for example, town manager, if you look at that from a gross number, we may be slightly higher, but then if you start to look at the tasks and what we are expecting from the position, then some of that tends to go away. I guess the one thing that did come out, from on the insurance side and things like that, we're not that far different in gross dollars per employee from other towns, as far as kind of looking at that town to town to town. However, from deductible and things like that, we are slightly higher than other towns.
Great, thank you.
Another question? One of the things, as a member of the committee, I'll start, and I want to ask for other folks. One of the things that surprised me, but shouldn't have, is the diversity amongst towns and how they do things. You know, a town population that might have a police department that you wouldn't think it would, or a public safety, you know, or rec departments, for instance, that are small versus big, or I think also to your point on some of the things, like there would be a town manager and assistant town manager. There would be, you know, other assistants, so that the job responsibilities do vary tremendously. So if we're going to take this and look at it as it is, we also have to remember the hybrid nature of every single town. It's not just us who does things differently and cross trains, and population you'd think would make it closer, but I think that was the biggest surprise to me, is that population didn't mean that you had the same type of makeup in your staff, which is what I came away with.
When we started looking, you know, one of the things is when we started looking at population, you know, because we have such a divergence from winter to summer, one of the things that was interesting is that a lot of towns don't even realize what their differential is winter to summer, but that's something for them to worry about, not for us. So what we did at that point was to try and kind of get a little bit of a different slant on it. We looked at number of housing units in addition, because that would, you know, you have some inherent cost whether that house is occupied full year round or not. And so we kind of looked at that in addition to the overall population issues.
Are there other members want to jump up and give their observations and jump right up? And I think it's important. We had a wonderful group of folks who looked at it from all different angles and have different backgrounds, so it'd be great to hear.
Marshall Bullock, North Raymond Road. A couple of caveats when you're looking at those reports. One is shared departments between towns. I think we found that Rockport shared their police activities and some other things with their local communities. So if you take a look at a department in a town, that may or may not be a self-sustaining department. Another example I think is Gray, where the technology department is totally in-house. And in Raymond, it's not. We have a consultant, outside consultant, to deal with some of those issues. So again, there's another example of not taking face value of department expenses.
Other folks, observations, thoughts, memories?
I think it's turned on.
Another factor,
Can you introduce yourself?
Robert Goslin, another factor in our analysis dealt with tenure and how that would as well affect with the salary for a given position. Someone in a position for 30 years, vice someone new or 5 years into that position. That often and frequently factored in the salary that they garnered for that position.
Right.
Thanks.
Brian Walker. Just reiterating a couple of things. I think we looked at the data through about as many different lenses as we possibly could. Started with a large town set and then reduced that town set based off of what we thought would be the most comparable group. And there are certain things that just kind of kept coming up. Cross-training is definitely something that's happening more and more. Raymond does a lot of it. There were towns that did more of it. There were some other towns that did less of it. But I do believe that Raymond came out very, very positively in terms of our overall cost of the cost of our employees to execute based off of comparing the towns from a size standpoint, whether that's population, whether that was a maximum summer population, whether that was the valuation that was used, or a number of different ratios. And each of those tabs, by the way, is a different way we looked at it. So if you think about each of the tabs that you have, and I think you have about 6 or 8, those are each a different lens, looking at the same set of data, but saying, okay, if we looked at it through this lens, what kind of pops up? I do think there's a couple things that pop up on a pretty regular basis. One is that some of our senior positions in the town are consistently higher than our average of other comparable towns. And that's not to say that that should or shouldn't be, but I think it's an important thing to know that there are a number of positions that are much higher than, and when I say much higher, I'm saying on average 20% over what's being paid at other towns that are comparable. And some of the points that have already been made about how you compare tenure and the like, I'd urge you to look at that and take that into the factor, because there's just so much different information. It's hard to make an apples to apples comparison. That being said, I think you can look and see some things that are clearly kind of rising to the top. I do think that there's some other things that where we're paying much lower than average, lower than our comparable towns. And the clerk positions in the town office is a good example of one, which is lower. I think that's an important one to point out. It also looks to me like, excuse me, the other place that might be low is in the fire chief position, fire and safety and EMS position as a lead position. So what happens with that, and that goes back to the select board, now what do you do with this information? How does it impact how you go forward? Now I'm speaking personally and not I'm speaking as a member, but if I can, as an individual. Am I allowed to do that, Mike? Or
Absolutely.
just, I do think it does tend to lend to the question of the across-the-board cost of living adjustment every year. Is that a viable way to move forward as a way of compensation and looking at compensation? Or does this study, which was quite comprehensive and a lot of work put in by a lot of people, a place where you can take a pulse point and say, okay, is this a place where we should start to look at taking that same amount of money that's being utilized, or more or a little bit less, depending on where you guys decide you want to be, but saying, is there a reallocation that should happen over time? Nothing dramatic, but over time, should we be looking to increase the compensation levels of some of the people that are at lower than average, while looking to say, do we slow possibly the compensation increases for some of the people that seem to be above the average? Thanks.
Good point. Thank you.
Memory serves, and for those of you who were all here when we started talking about this in 2012, I think part of the goal on this was conversation was happening about a possible merit pay system, and I think the feeling was you couldn't even consider a merit pay system without having job descriptions and job ranges. And I really think that, you know, part of the exercise here is to now, we have hybrid jobs, we have jobs that are shared, so how do you define those and put a range to it for both a management standpoint on a range in a position so that management has an idea how to hire, but also from an employee standpoint. If you know that a job you're in has a range between X and X and you're bumping up against the ceiling, as in the private sector, you make a choice. Am I comfortable with that ceiling, or do I need to get more training? Should I do more job sharing? I mean, there's knowledge, I think, especially in personnel, is a great way to help the employee and the organization. So I think that part of this, and Sam, it might have been you that put this committee together back in October of 12, where do we go from here? And I know going into the budget, which I have not been part of my goals as chair is to look at, you know, trying to set some parameters that would make it easier for everybody to understand, you know, their jobs better, I guess, and the responsibilities of those jobs. So I'm hoping to take this, and after budget season, start that work here in town if we can find some folks who would be willing to help us with it. So
I think that is required action.
So anybody that remembers it differently, but that was my recollection at the start of this process. So. Anybody else want to add? Rolf, you want to, any parting words?
No, I guess the only other thing that I would point out is the Cumberland County was supposed to be doing a wage survey as well, and they had committed they were going to get us a copy of that when it was complete. I've never seen that, so I don't know if it was completed and just they forgot about us, or if they never completed it. So, but that's another data point that you may be able to draw on.
So on the flip side of that, do we owe the folks who gave us surveys, now that this is a final report, should we be sending along copies?
I was requested to reciprocate.
I would think it would be a nice gesture now that if, I assume the board will accept this, and then, you know, we probably still have the basic contacts of the folks we sent out to. It'd be nice, I think, to send them a copy of this. I mean, they did take the time, and a lot of folks took the time verbally, you know, so that we had the questions in writing, and we called them back. I know I went and sat with people. I know other committee members went and sat with people or phone called. I think it would be nice to share this without having to have somebody ask for it, so.
I know when we did the in-depth interviews, most of those were, you know, 2 or 3 hours worth of time with somebody. So I mean, you know, it was encouraging that they were willing to share the information that they would without, you know, we really did not run into anyone that was reluctant to get us information and work with us on that, which is nice to know of the neighboring areas.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So, board, I guess at this point, I'm looking for a couple of things. I guess an acceptance of the report, but also maybe Sam, a motion to thank the committee and disband the committee, as we've kind of had a purpose when we do committees. We try to promise that they won't be ongoing forever on the temporary committees, and although this one has been maybe a little longer, it would be great to thank them and send them on their way.
I agree, but I'd be very careful about sending them on their way. I don't want them to go too far, because they are the knowledgeable ones at this point on this issue, and we may either want to use them on another committee, I hate to use that word, going forward, to totally analyze the data and come up with some conclusions for the town. Or be on a committee. I hate the word committee, but
Working group.
working group, yeah. But anyway, yes, I thank you guys very much. That is a very comprehensive report, in my opinion. I wonder how many of those have actually been done in Maine. Whether anyone's ever done one like that.
There are definitely surveys out there, but I think the spreadsheet version now, for those folks who got only the Selectmen's packet, which is in a PDF form, I know that the analysis is also available in Excel, and Danielle sent it to all of us in Excel. It's much easier to go through in an Excel format than it is in the PDF format. So, it is easier to do that way. And I think when we share it with the other communities, we should share it in Excel form, not in, I don't know, is there a way to lock the Excel sheets? Yeah. So if we should probably lock the sheets before we send them so that our data doesn't get, but it's still easier to go through them. So.
Anyway, thank you guys very, very much. It was a long 3 months, wasn't it?
That was the economic development.
Yes, it was.
Can I have a motion to accept the report?
Moved.
Second.
Any further comments? All those in favor? Thank you very much. This is great work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great, terrific.
So you don't have to stay. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Brian.
No, next is tax acquired property.
Sue, why don't you-
Yeah.
You had mentioned having a motion to also disband the committee. Did you want to do that, or did you mean that?
Yeah.
I don't think Sam wanted to do that.
I really
I
don't.
We know where they live, we know where they, the phone number, so we
And
can
we
call
know
them
where their
back.
children go to school.
I think
I'm
the
from
ad
New York.
hoc, the ad hoc part, they're disbanded without the official motion, so.
Yeah.
Former chairman and committee appointees.
Once the report is accepted, the committee is done, right?
I don't think you're done.
So, thank you, Sue, but no.
You're far from done.
So the next item on the agenda
Thanks, Rolf.
is tax acquired property review. Danielle Loring and Sue Carr will help lead us through this wonderful spreadsheet we have here
Yep.
that I printed out separately.
Thank you.
Hi, Sue.
Hi there.
Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Sue Carr. I'm the deputy tax collector. We've added 4 new tax acquired properties. We really added 5, but one of them, the last one, Clifford Woodbury, I have researched and found the son, and he has paid all the taxes, and so a quitclaim deed will go back to him. The dad had passed away and they lived in Pennsylvania, so researching, I found him, but
So since you did the report, he's come
since,
forward.
yeah,
Okay.
so,
So you could have found it much easier. He happens to be my father-in-law.
oh, I didn't know that.
Didn't know that. And his son is my brother-in-law, of course.
Well, the son didn't even know that dad owned that
Um,
piece of property, so.
That I know, yes.
So, and for, most of them are all on payment plans. There's Lewis, James Lewis, who came forward last year for a payment plan, but never paid anything. Made one payment, and that was it.
Which page are we on, Sue?
First
Oh,
page.
First page, thank you.
James Lewis, like near the bottom.
Gotcha.
And all the ones that don't have payment plans, I have sent them letters stating to give me a call to make a payment arrangement with me. Jane Parker, who's on the second page, I can't seem to find her. I looked online, the address I have is still the address that I can find online. She is in, I believe, Thompson or Freeport, one of those. So I don't know if she's getting my mail or just not accepting it.
Are they coming back?
Hmm?
Are the letters coming back then?
They come back, but they don't say anything.
Are they certified or regular?
That one of them was certified and just the date was on it, so I'm assuming she's there and
Okay.
she's just not accepting it.
Okay.
As far as Vol Enterprises, he has passed away, and that's just recently. His daughter called me, she lives in Massachusetts, wanted me to change the address to send the tax bills to her. And that's when I informed her that he was going to foreclosure, which she was quite upset. And so I told her for now, I would take just $100 for all the little pieces of property he has until she knows exactly what his estate is and how she's gonna deal with it, so.
And those properties were all on this list a year and a half ago.
Last year.
Then they got
Yeah.
off the list,
Then they got off and
and now they're back.
they're back,
Okay.
yeah. And, she does wanna sell those. I do know that she doesn't want the property, so. And I know Teresa had a question on,
On Cater,
Cater, yes.
Which
That
page?
one?
first one, like
This-
third one down.
Yep.
Yeah, that one I have no idea. I've looked since you've called, researched, and there was a lien holder, but they have discharged the lien.
Okay.
but I don't know if they sold it. We haven't gotten a new deed or anything stating that it was sold.
I remember going down 85 and seeing some kind of sign out there, whether I thought it was an auction sign.
The property next to it sold. He owned two properties, one was a house or the yurt, and the other one was land, and the land sold.
Okay, well, but no, it was at the end of their driveway there. It was right because they have the two pillars at the end. But what happens is, haven't seen anything since. And I remember, I mean, I know him from La Crosse, and he had said, they got land, why buy something else, you know, if he can live off that land too, type thing. But I remember seeing some kind of sign either for sale, but I really thought it was an auction sign is what it is, so I didn't know.
Yeah, it was the yurt or the
How long ago was that?
I see just last fall, last summer maybe.
So that, you would have gotten notice.
We would have,
Yeah, you
yeah,
would've gotten
Danielle would have
notice
gotten a
immediately.
deed by that, for
Because there's only
that.
usually 30 days to close.
Okay, there's definitely some kind of sign at the end, and I don't know if they tried selling it then and it just didn't sell then. You know, that it,
Yeah.
it wasn't up very long.
I even went back to the deeds tonight to see if, you know, there was a deed back there that we missed, but I couldn't find a deed
Yeah.
for it,
Catered.
so.
Okay.
He was on the
So,
planning board.
Sue,
He's a lawyer in town.
all these payment plans,
It's a sports shop.
they're pretty consistent? Anybody a pain in your clerk duties?
No, most of them are very consistent. Well, Square J, nobody seems to know who owns that piece. That's right.
He surrendered,
But that's a no,
You
so that really
surrendered it?
doesn't have a,
surrendered it to the town.
Okay,
okay?
so that one is the only one I didn't have a payment plan with either last year or this year, and now I just found out that he surrendered it, so.
But I mean, you've got payment plans, and
I got payment plans,
we asked
they-
you last year to make sure they were all within the 5-year limit and all those kind of
Yep,
things.
and
people
they are falling roughly in that 5-year limit. The only one that has, they have medical problems, they have financial problems, is the Strout property. She comes in and she'll make a payment, but it's not always the 200, it's, you know, it might be $50, but she comes in every month and can give me whatever she can, but that's the only one that is not the 200. Everybody else does payments. The BBW LLC, she owns 3 properties, and she's a little behind because she fell this winter and broke her ankle or a foot or something like that, so she's been out of work. Other than that, everybody makes, and I'm sorry, Beatty, I just got a hold of him again in Massachusetts, and I upped his payment from last year to this year to $500 and told him that it has to be made every month or I'd be on the phone with them. So,
How many times have you been on the phone with him?
well, I just sent out this letter, just,
Right, but he's one of our problems.
yeah, he's kind of one of the problems that I have to call and say, I haven't received your payment.
So, why?
He's in Massachusetts, and truthfully, that's the only one I don't know.
No, I mean, why are we gonna call him? At what
Oh.
point, at what point do we stop calling him?
Yeah,
It
Yeah.
just, you know, it's not your responsibility to be his alarm clock.
yeah.
So, I mean, you know,
I think
from a-
what she's trying to do is get what she can until she gets direction from us, though, is what it is. So she's trying to.
I just try to get most of them. I mean, most of them are really good. Conley, I know they've had problems, and now she's gotten in contact with her bank, and the bank is making a deal with her to pay off her taxes and just charge her more on her mortgage or whatever the deal is gonna be.
I see more bankruptcies on here.
Yes, and those, I cannot touch them.
Yep. Some of these that are pretty high, is that payment plan going to fit within that? Because they're adding on current taxes compared to what they owe from behind.
The highest one that
Well, I guess that's part of the point, is the payment
they're
plan.
all within, the highest one is 45 months, which is within that 5-year span.
But part of their agreement and their payback is that they will keep up on their current taxes, correct?
Well, it has to go to the back taxes, but yes,
But I mean-
they end up paying like 2 years in 1 year. So that
Right,
it's
so
the,
they have to stay current this year and then, well, with the amount of money they owe this year, right, plus the payment plan.
price, right. So in the payment plan, it includes the like 2 year in 1
'Cause
year.
I would agree with you, Teresa, if somebody is not keeping up with their payment plan and they're current, then they're falling further behind, then
Right.
the payment plan's not sufficient.
That's
Payment-
why I just look at some of these are just really, really high,
Yeah,
That's why we had said 5 years.
right,
so.
it's 5 years plus current year,
Plus, yeah.
as opposed to staying at 5 years.
Right, and just be, right.
So these, Sue, just for clarification, these, I'm gonna give you Sydney Thorne, just because it's a $26,000 one
Yep.
here. That $26,000 is just from 08, 09,
No, that's all the years added up. That's what he owes completely.
including up to this year,
Yes,
okay?
yes.
But just, okay.
Suggestions for us? Shall we be tougher?
A lot of them are really trying, to be truthfully honest. I know the stories of most of them, like, Brent, he passed away. She has had a hard time. And now they were financed by, owner finance type thing. The owner has now stepped up and said, I'm gonna be paying the taxes. So she's changed it from the 200 or whatever it was last year to this year for 325. And so she's taken over. The only ones I see is really the Square J, the Jane Parker, unless she gets a hold of me. And there was one more that, James Lewis.
And Qatar, right? Cater, how do you say that?
Cater.
Gator. Yes, that one.
Yeah.
I don't understand that one.
All right,
Are you
well,
sending letters out to them, or they're just?
I've already sent one letter saying, please get a hold of me, because the selectmen are looking over the town acquired properties. I need a payment arrangement done with you before they decide what to do with the property. And then there's one more letter that I send out after you guys have determined that this is a demand, you either do it or you lose it.
Could we get a list from you, Sue, of the ones that are not keeping up with?
well, that's here.
That's what these are,
It's-
Yeah, so
the 4 no's.
So I think to follow up on Sam's point, I guess I look at this list and say anybody without a payment plan goes to the next step. Sue, for the next report,
Mm-hmm.
anybody who's a pain in your collection gets a letter.
Okay,
I mean, basically,
Yeah.
we're
That's
gonna
what I'm
say,
saying.
all right, this isn't working, we're done.
we're done.
We're
Yep.
foreclosing. And if you wanna send out a preliminary letter now that says
I
that's what,
probably will, yes.
right? To make sure that everybody on the payment plan, you could send it out to everybody on the payment plan that just says something along the lines of, at recent select board meeting, because we've had so many delinquencies, maybe not you, but a generic letter that everybody gets. Delinquencies will be considered in default at the time of next, review by the select board.
Okay.
And foreclosure will start. Because it's not your job to be their alarm clock, so.
So she doesn't call anymore either.
Well, I think if she's
Oh, sure,
agreed,
yeah.
if she's agreed to somebody to call and she's doing that last ditch effort, it's part of her process, yes.
Okay.
But I would not be calling on a monthly basis to say, hey, where's the payment?
All right, I will let him know that I will not remind him anymore.
And I just think that we've got the list isn't getting shorter,
Right.
No.
Well,
but the payments are much better.
we saw a lot of the smaller ones that were on here before off of there, because there was a couple small ones that are gone, which are good.
Yes,
but
we did get rid of, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. right off, and then there's one more that's, he's paying on this year, and as soon as he pays this year off, he gets another quick claim too, so.
But some of these ones that are still left on here though are huge.
But, you know, at the next time we're here, we'll be sending some properties off to John for consideration for, and then moving towards the next round of sales.
When do they come before us again?
It's usually at this time of the year, every year,
Okay.
because my foreclosures usually are in February, so.
Yeah, but I mean, the sale part of it, they've got to go through the process. Once they're foreclosed, there's the process we have to go through, so. I guess I'd look for a couple of different motions. One, to authorize her to send a letter to everybody to talk about delinquency.
That's move.
Second?
All those in favor?
That was easy.
Is that enough for you, Sue?
That's enough. Oh,
Both Sues? And then I think on the new properties that have been added to the list, we need a motion to go to the next step in our procedure.
So moved.
Second?
Questions, suggestions? All those in favor? Danielle, you haven't said anything, and we've just made two motions. What do you got for us?
Can
As
I
part
just
of this, anything?
ask something quick? Why is it you only do it once a year instead of look at twice a year, that we could be updating it more or something? Is it just because it's the time of the year we do it?
Foreclosure
Yeah,
process.
good point.
But, and I know you have to go through different processes, but if we looked at it like now and then looked at it again like in another 6 months.
Well, it does come back to us once they go through the process. This is just the official foreclosure.
I'm looking at the whole list in 6 months or whatever
Hmm.
to see if,
Because the properties come back to us, once we don't get responses, the properties come back to us to see if we're gonna sell them. But you're saying the full property list each year, every 6 months.
so that way we were maybe watching them more or just giving you more of a direction. So where it's coming from us, so you're
Not a
not
bad idea.
the bad guy, is what it is, I'm thinking. So maybe like
We
twice a
can
year
gauge how
instead of
well we
once a
deal with
year. And I know you got little times in between that we see them when they come back to us for foreclosure and for sale and stuff like that, but maybe have this come back to us.
Yeah, you need to be the good guy here, we're the bad guys. So.
Well, that's why I'm giving her kind of the out on this one, so she's getting directions from us. So that way, where if anybody gives her grief, it came from us,
right.
because you got the hard job.
Yeah, I wanna make sure that we support you on these payment
For
schedules.
the most part, everybody that I deal with are really, they don't, I mean, at first they're upset but usually once they realize we'll take a payment arrangement, this is how much I need, they usually will work with me. And I tell them, you know, if something happens, please let me know so that you don't go 3 months without a payment and I have no clue why. If I can document, you know, like the one that broke her ankle and was out of work, she had surgery and everything on it. It's like she couldn't go to work, and I can understand
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, cause there's a couple $100,000 here.
Yeah.
200
Yeah.
plus.
that's, yeah.
Yeah. And it was down. That's the sad part. It was getting down.
Oh, I know.
And
All right.
it was under 100,000 and I was excited until.
Danielle, anything to add on this?
Well, just that, you know, I think that we've done a good job, especially in cleaning up the tax acquired properties that we had. I believe we had 5, and over the last couple of sales, we've gotten rid of them. So the only tax acquired property that we have left right now is Square J, because, what's the gentleman's name, Don?
John Kendall.
We finally found him, and then in emailing it, he was going to pay it off, and then he finally emailed us back and said, not worth it, keep it, and then walked away. And then, but there is an issue where I'm trying to work out, Phil Mishu, who bought the former Chipco building, believes that this was supposed to be included in his deed, so I'm working with him to get the deed research done, because if he proves that, then he'll come right in and pay the taxes and we'll be done. So, you know, that's the issue with that one. And other than that, you know,
Who's paying for the research,
the research?
the deed research?
Like I just do it on my
Oh, okay, so
staff
we're not
time.
having it done out of
No,
house,
no.
okay.
No, you pay me with my paycheck,
Okay.
like.
You forget, when you're on my side of things, you would pay somebody to do deed research, so, yeah.
No.
It does seem logical that it would be part of the InventTech Chipco complex, but you can't just take that you know, at face value, I guess.
Well, the Harmon property was actually part of a subdivision that he created off of Harmon Road, so it was a separate enterprise.
Oh,
but
okay, I thought Phil's pitch was that it should have been incorporated in
He,
the sale.
he was told at the time of sale that it was, but then
Okay.
I've been looking at his deed, I said, I can't see evidence of that, you produce the evidence and I will, you know what I mean, cause I don't want him paying taxes on something that he doesn't own, cause just cause he buys it like that, or he pays for it, doesn't mean that's his, so.
Right, well, my point was gonna be, I mean, his argument is potentially a good argument, but he's gotta show on
Yeah.
paper that it's true.
Yes, exactly, so, that's what I'm waiting for on that one, but other than that, we've cleared up all the other ones, and generally when Sue starts sending out her letters, it kinda puts the fear of foreclosure in people, and they start coming out of the woodwork and finding the money. So this list always ebbs and flows, and you guys should probably recognize that, so.
Mhm.
And she does a good job in working with the people, and I respect that, so.
It's not the favorite part of the job. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in last minute, Sue.
That's all right.
Danielle probably thanks you for coming in last minute also. Danielle, IRT project. So, before Danielle starts, just so everybody is caught up, I looked at the summary of the IRT presentation from the budget talks. I was rather surprised by the numbers, did not expect that from our preliminary conversations last year. So I asked Danielle and Dawn to look into an alternative plan, and part of what Danielle is here to talk about tonight is that alternative, which will probably change things for budget talks as well. Okay, because as I said, I've been the sponsor of this, and from this group, and I was really surprised at the number. So.
I'm sorry, the number of what? I'm sorry.
Cost of the IRT project for the.
Oh, to do the whole thing.
To do the
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that presentation you had a week ago, Monday, for the rec fields.
Yeah.
Danielle.
Okay, so my primary goal here is to get a little bit of contingency money tonight, about $10,000 to start doing environmental work, which will help to shape the scope of the work that's going to be required for Patricia Avenue. If you remember, this is what happened with Egypt Road, and as a result, we found a lot of frog eggs and the project died. So I'm hoping this one doesn't die. I'm hoping that it will help to minimize our numbers because of favorable conditions. So with that said, if I were to get $10,000 in contingency tonight for environmental, such as vernal pool and wetland mapping, preparation and presentation and drawings, site meetings, and design and committee meetings, all of the engineer would then only need to carry over $4,000 to the 2015-16 budget, and based on removing some of the aspects from the project that which is the road leading from Webb's Mills Road and the water line up through to the Patricia Avenue site, that cost would also go down from $115,000 to $85,000. So the request for the 15-16 budget would be $89,000 versus $136,000. However, because we haven't done that work to know what is actually on the ground and do all the site work, the numbers can't be adjusted all the way down in terms of what we're going to need for materials. So that number is still a little bit higher at $1,594,670, but that includes irrigation. And I was talking with Dawn, and one of the issues is we're not sure that we can dig a well at that site because it is a former landfill. But however, if you go up at that site right now, you'll see that nature does its course, and it is like the ground up there is pretty fertile because it used to be a sludge
Sludge
site. So, the grass seems to grow pretty well there, so irrigation may not necessarily be an issue, and that would help to knock the cost down, but that will have to be done through the soil survey that will take place. So, I'm sorry to not come back with more definitive answers and numbers, but that's kind of why I'm hoping that we'll be able to move forward this spring, so that we'll get some clear representation for the third phase of the project, because we've already lowered the second phase, the first being the 10,000 for environmentals, the second phase for being design and engineering work, now 89, and then the third being the material costs. So, because right now we're looking at a total overall project, instead of $2 million, we're looking at $1,720,670 as a probable estimate. But I know it's still, as I said, it's not significant savings, but the issue is definitely is we need more answers to know. You know what I mean? Because I think that these numbers are high because they include an irrigation system, which I think that may not be necessary. And I also think that he's put a lot of money into grading that I don't think is necessary either. But he is the engineer, and I think without more information, he's not comfortable with reducing it more.
I know that the time we did the site walk, that one of the things he talked about was not knowing exactly what he had in loam type materials up there. And loam is one of the most expensive materials for fields. However, his hope was, because of all the sludge and the fact that it used to be forest, that there is a lot of good looking material up there, so that we wouldn't have to bring in as much. However, I do know that the cost that we were looking at the Egypt Road site was under $1 million.
700 or something.
So, and I don't remember if that had irrigation in it or not, and I don't know how the apples compare.
Yeah, that's a much wetter site as well. So there was no irrigation system, and they said we can eliminate some items too, like such as a concession stand, since there won't be running water, and so on and so forth. So all of these numbers can be adjusted to fit more in line with what it is that we're looking for. Because I think the overall objective is to have a recreational site, and if it's missing some of the amenities, that's just life. It's just, they can always be built in later. It's just getting a start.
Don?
In a perfect world, of course, you'd have the water line, or you'd have a comprehensive irrigation system via this huge well that he's proposing. I've never worked in a town or known of a town that had a perfect field. Every town that I have ever been affiliated with had fields that were, sustained through natural precipitation, so natural watering. So I don't think that's a deal breaker at all in my mind, but I'm not an engineer. That number is a huge number in his estimate. And the issue of a well for drinking water, which came up today, of course, that's a more significant issue because of the former use of the property, so that would want to be looked at. But to me, I mean, I would talk with the engineer and say, water line out, road out, well, irrigation system out, if this place, is sufficient soils and meets the other environmental considerations, and then hopefully you can get that number down to where you want it to be, closer to the Egypt Road number. I think that's still doable, but you can't find that out to some degree until you do the investigation. The investigation costs money. Of course, you could argue that the investigation is worthwhile in and of itself, because until you do the investigation, like Egypt Road, we didn't know we had a swamp until we did the investigation there. Now we do. So that limits our ability to use that site. We now have a site we can manage for wetlands, conservation purposes, for woodland management. So we don't really know what we have with Patricia Avenue. So at some level, you need to investigate it to find out, and that to me would not be a bad investment. And I'm hopeful that if you could take out some of the more, and I don't want to use this term because it's the wrong connotation, but the more grandiose elements of a ballpark, you could still have a serviceable field that would be far exceed anything that we have now. And by the way, anything we have now is not irrigated, and it's working out pretty well, what we do have. Agawam fields, for instance. So that's just how I feel about it. I think it's gotta be downscaled in terms of some of that content.
Teresa?
I thought one of the conditions to get some of the land is to be able to run water up through, off of Webb's Mills, I think it is what it is, up on their property. 'Cause
We're
they-
removing that element.
We're removing the access road.
Okay, alright, so.
Due to cost.
Okay, so I think one of the other things is if you just, what are the costs as far as maybe just putting just the ground, and then you can turn around, you can go find sponsors to say, okay, this concession stand, put somebody's name on it, you know, whatever. Time Warner, you know what I mean, just thinking of a name, do you know what I mean, as far as building it, paying for it, that type of thing, sponsoring it. But to get it from 1.7 down to what Egypt is, it's gonna be a lot of cuts. It's gonna be a lot of cuts.
Part of the investigation here is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Danielle, but the reason you're here tonight is that we need the environmental money for frog season,
March
which
to
is,
May.
Coming right up.
which is, yeah, basically April.
Are they gonna get in with snow?
Well, might be a slight delay, but the way the snow's gone down the last 2 days,
Yeah.
you never know. And I guess part of my question for town meeting is a reasonable number for town meeting for this year. You know, and we're, timing wise, we're not gonna have that like
Is
we
that
did for
the
Egypt.
89,000? Because that number is pretty, that one, as I said, is his engineering. Let's see, what is phase 2? Phase 2 is doing boundary surveys, the base plan and updated concept and pre-design permitting, coordination with CMP and gas companies, so just getting our utilities in place. Boundary and topo survey, traffic movement permit and utility design as well, and then as well as engineered drawings for construction and planning board review and DEP permitting. So all of those items are non-material and pretty set in
Okay.
per schedule. So those are, that 89,000 is a concrete number.
Okay, all right, I misunderstood, thank you. Other questions for Danielle or the project in general? Do we have any idea what's in selectmen contingency at the moment?
I don't believe you've used any this year.
I don't think so either. We're pretty flush with contingency money. I don't think this is an issue. I know it's not an issue, but it's,
Didn't we use some right off the bat last year? Or am I thinking 2 years ago?
That's 2 years ago for the purchase of the tower site and
That was true.
the original IRT project, but that was a
That
while
was
ago.
2 budgets ago.
Yep.
as I say though, I think that the investigation money is, you know, because everything's arguable in this business, but arguably well-spent money to know what you have for land.
And I know that we approved money for this, for the Egypt Road site, and the money stopped being spent immediately once the frogs were discovered. And I know that some of that money has been used to get us going in this, so this number is actually less than it could have been because we did have leftover monies from the last request, so. Is there a motion?
Yep. I'd like to make a motion to grant $10,000 to the Patricia Ave IRT project
Second?
From contingency.
From contingency.
from contingency,
contingency,
from
yeah.
selectmen contingency.
Second, Sam?
Second.
Further discussion, questions? All those in favor? Thank you. Unanimous, Sue?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danielle. Item 4 on the agenda tonight is unfinished business. We have Nathan White here from the Public Works Department for a request and a fairly quick item this evening, I think.
Yeah, it was brought to my attention that our, I guess for lack of better words, our personnel policy needs to be cleaned up. And I think we ought to probably progress forward with doing that before we go any further.
So, Don?
I just want to say that the personnel policy was a project of the previous town manager, and it's approximately, I think, 19 years now since that was originally drafted and then vetted through Bernstein Scher. And so I'm sure it does have, you know, deficiencies and other issues that need to be addressed. So I'd concur with Nathan's direction. And I think this comes about from the Selectmen review, and so I think it makes perfect sense to do that. And although it has been amended a few times since the 90s, it has not had a clean slate review since that time.
I think the last review on that, or the last update, was 2007.
2007, but that was just an amendment.
It was just
The
an
original
amendment,
document is somewhere back in the 90s. I think,
96 or 7, correct. Been a while.
which is coming up on, 96 is coming up on 19 years, right? 20
19
years,
years, yeah.
coming right up.
So, excuse me, since this, to explain this further, since this agenda item was put on a week ago, the policies have been read and reread and looked at, and an HR specialist has volunteered their time to help us rewrite these policies and to make the changes that Nathan would like to see happen, which is why he brought it to us in the first place. So Nathan approached me and asked if I would allow this to be done, and I don't see any reason that it shouldn't be done, that we should allow HR experts to take a crack at this, do a full rewrite. Then we're not doing a piecemeal kind of approach to making the changes that the department would like to see. So
I agree.
Absolutely.
What's a time frame on this?
I will get in contact with them tomorrow, and we'll get a time frame started. I would
think within a month's time.
I would think by the
that's what I'm
next
thinking.
meeting.
Well, that may be a little tight, but we can shoot for that. I
Yeah,
think
we've
you want
got
to be.
budget stuff in between, so
Yeah,
maybe
there's a
we
lot
oughta-
going on between now and then.
Why don't we put it out two meetings? That'll give us plenty of time to get it corrected.
And I think that also gives you a chance to address some of your summer concerns on the summer hour
Correct.
change, which happens
Yeah.
when, Nate?
We go on our summer schedule the week after spring vacation for the schools. We have to line it up with the schools for sweeping contract with the schools.
Okay, so it'll be close to the start of your summer schedule.
Correct, yes.
All right, great. Well, why don't we do that, Nate? And we'll look forward to seeing you back after you've had a rewrite.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nate.
Thank you, Nate.
Thank you, Nate.
Next item on the agenda is public comment. Anybody here this evening have anything they'd like to say to the general public or the board regarding town?
Robert Goslin, Patricia Avenue. A couple cautions in respect to the IRT project. One, traffic flow exiting Patricia. I understand there's some type of traffic permit. I don't know what that involves. But just a single individual vehicle trying to pull out into traffic on any given day during the summer season, be it baseball, soccer, will be extremely difficult for two teams' worth of cars to pull out into traffic. Secondly, in terms of water supply, being on Patricia, we are at an elevated area where my well was 1,200 feet. It drilled well 1,200 feet. So you're above me, so I'm expecting that your well will be well beyond 1,200 feet. And lastly, experience of building on Patricia Avenue is that the ground is very bony, large boulders, and that you'd have to remove those boulders, even use them as a boundary like I did on my property, and that would result in more materials to be brought in to be excavated into a playground. If I said lastly, I have one more lastly then. Just to consider some type of initiative to Mr. McGoldrick, that when in the future he does develop that property, that it would be to include access to this project as well.
That's a very good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bob, I don't comment very often on public comment, but I will because I'm involved in the IRT this time. When this site was originally proposed, I had an issue with exactly what you talked about with the 302 access because of trying to go cross traffic. One of the things that changed my mind, or two things changed my mind. One, cost. when I realized how much, even with the folks from the military doing the work, how much cost that road was going to be. But then it was brought to my attention that it is permissible to have a crossing guard for times. They do it down at the church in Wyndham, and they have, you know, the vests, the flashers, they go out and they do their sign. And so part of my thing is to make sure that is okay, and that may be a requirement of, you know, times up there, both entering and exiting, is to have a crossing guard and to be able to do that, because you're right. I think unless that is addressed in the plan, I still think it's a non-starter, and that's what I felt from day one, that's not an acceptable access point without changes.
Right.
So.
And that would take a brave soul to be there with that stop sign.
Yeah.
Especially on camp swap over days where the traffic runs all the way into Wyndham, and it's just stop and go all the way. But I'm glad to know that that will be considered in the development of this plan. Thank you.
Other comments from the public this evening? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Selectmen comment?
Lonnie just rolled his eyes at me.
Lonnie, you want to go first?
No,
He doesn't want to talk.
Yes, he does.
I will if I need to, but you seem like you always need to.
This is important.
I'm just playing.
This is important
Go
stuff.
ahead.
Two things. I wouldn't want to be that person. I'm talking on the RT thing, because I got to tell you, coming in there, you got people pulling out from that's a small little road back there, Patricia Avenue, and those poor people coming in and out of there. And I think you're going to need something. This is just from a person that hates traffic in Raymond. In the summer, you're going to need a traffic light. You're going to need something more than one person, because that one person. Huh?
We cannot have traffic.
We can't.
Why?
I got to tell you, I think all the people coming in from out of state are not going to look at this guy. They're going to say, wait a second, we're slowing down, and they're going to be on their texting, and they're going to be coming down that middle line, sideswiping people. That's scary. So that's something,
That's
yes.
why we have to do the study.
Exactly. Second thing, very, 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 very important. People need to get out to Wyndham March 25th at 5:30. The voting is at 6 o'clock.
What's this for?
For the cost sharing for the RSU. And what's happening is a 3-year process that our taxes, if it passes, it'll be 3 years, and our taxes will lower according to what we pay for the school budget. And they've amended it so where just the major costs would go to each town. And what major capital costs are: any new addition or any new purchase. The other stuff would be minor, and that would be split between the two towns. But this vote is going to come down to a hand vote. It's literally going to be how many people from Wyndham can get there, how many people from Raymond to get there. And I am going to make a motion when we get there that we put it in a ballot vote, so that way people are comfortable writing down yes or no instead of raising their hand. Because there are some people that are not comfortable raising their hand for fear of possibly losing your job on how they vote. You know, they spoke up about that. But March 25th, 5:30, get there, auditorium, Wyndham High School. If anybody needs rides, anybody needs something, I will come pick you up. I'll bring somebody else to drive you down. But it may come down to 1 or 2 votes. So we need
I'm
people to
gonna
get
drive down and I'll take as many people that need rides.
Cool. And we'll come back from
Wednesday, March 25th.
Yes, in the Wyndham High School auditorium
5:30 is question and answers, 6:30 is the
is
vote.
the vote.
6.
6 is
6 is the vote, and
Thank
you will be out of there by 6:15 pretty much. But this is huge.
And if people want to find out more, they can find out about it online. You can read how it works.
They haven't sent me the new proposal.
Good. I think
Marshall,
they-
go ahead.
The Wyndham RSU, if you're going on web, RSU 14, it pops up the Wyndham school system, and they have a lot of this information on that website. But I think it's under the school committee and not under the school itself. But they have a real nice website, and I'm pretty sure it's there. It's under the RSU 14 School Committee. And all their presentations are up on that, as is their budget.
Thanks, Marshall.
How should they vote?
Vote yes.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, vote yes. Yes. Raise your hand for yes. Don't raise your hand for no.
Other selectmen comments? I have an update from the library. Sunday, March 22nd from 1 to 3, there's going to be knit or crochet a scarf for breast cancer at the library. They have the yarn, but you may want to bring your own or your own needles as well. There will be light refreshments provided. We have 2 author visits coming up. Franco Smith, author of the book Dream Singer, will be at the library tomorrow night at 6:30. He will also talk about 5 elements of storycraft. There's a on the library website, there's a little info about Frank. I happen to know Frank and have read his book, and it's a wonderful book. It is not based in Maine. However, it's a great journey book, and kind of coming of age with a little bit of mystery rolled in. And then Jim Baumer, I believe is how you say it, of Moxie Book fame, will be here on March 25th at 6:30. He'll be talking about famous Maine humorist John Gould and the essays that he's written. So those are the 2 author visits coming up. Both authors are from Maine. One writes about Maine and one does not. So Sally invites you to those. Already happened.
Already happened. I can't
March
see the date from
March
here.
8th. Dawn was pointing out the game day that already happened on March 8th. So
Okay.
I don't have anything else. Anybody else?
Nope.
Teresa, you got something else?
I'm not finding that. I'm finding on the RSU website now. I'm finding the old recommendation. Yeah, Plan B is not up there. Plan B just recently came out.
It was on the town website,
Their website, Wyndham's website,
a Raymond Town website, on the right-hand side.
but it's not on their school website. That's what I'm saying. Because I'm not finding it on here now. It has just the old plan, is what it is.
Not scroll down.
Yeah, last Wednesday is when I think they had it. They did the presentation here, but they have not updated it yet on here.
Is there budget proposal also?
I haven't seen that. I was just policy.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's better to have the right information and we have the time.
Yeah, I'm only seeing the old presentation is what it is. So I will send an email out and see if they can get it updated right away as to what the new method B is.
There was a link on the agenda that came out for last Thursday's meeting here that went to B, but I don't know where that link went to. All I know is I
can send it to the town of Raymond and
Have them put it on, yeah, good.
push me to do that. I'd be happy to do that.
yeah.
Was it part of the old agenda? I always do.
It was a corrected agenda that came out for last
Right.
Thursday's
I have
meeting.
that on our website, but I'll move it back to the front. I didn't realize it was part of it, so.
Yeah, there's a link to a rate plan B.
That's the
When I saw
present.
it, it was Plan A, and then if you scroll down further, Plan B was right there.
And Plan B was approved last Thursday.
Unanimous.
Yeah.
Can I send it to you?
Yeah, absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, so Marshall will send that along to Danielle and we'll get that up on our website as well.
Okay, just so people know. So go to
Yep.
our website to find out what the new plan is.
Thank you, Marshall.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Teresa, anything else before I move on? Dawn?
No,
You sure?
I'm good.
Dawn?
Welcome back. by the way.
Okay, town manager report and communications, confirmed date for next regular meeting, proposed April 7th.
I'm good with that.
For 7.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody good?
Yeah.
Okay, Okay, so now I have a raft of meetings, so nobody in Raymond should want for something to do in the evening.
Hold on.
Okay.
I have the 7th as the selectmen budget vote. Is that also gonna be the night of our meeting?
Typically, you do them together, yeah?
So it'll be a very thin selectmen agenda and a very large budget agenda?
Probably, that's what we'll shoot for.
I'm staring at Danielle.
Danielle as the keeper of the queue.
That's right.
The keeper of the queue.
Is that true? Does anyone else have that as the, with the budget? I don't have that
That's
in
on the
mind.
schedule.
It's on the budget schedule as when
I
we,
never
when
look
we,
at that.
What?
I said I never look at that. I just usually hear when the next meeting is. What it is.
Typically, by the time you
Sorry.
get to that point, you will have wrangled out all of your differences and be ready to go, typically. But if you're not, I would suspect that what you'll do after the first meeting is you'll schedule a second meeting or do something along that line, and
you have the budget workshop on the 24th.
right.
Right.
And that's at 7 p.m.
March 24th, budget workshop.
Yeah.
That's the
now.
one, that's the one where the board does all of the negotiating.
The gloves
And,
come off.
and then they do the final version. They should take all of the notes from that meeting, they being the staff, make that into a warrant form, and then we go through and just double
Okay.
check.
Okay.
But it still takes time. That's why we usually try to have a
What
lighter
time is-
select board.
What
We're gonna
time
have
is
it at
the
7?
7?
The budget workshop is scheduled for 7.
7?
And then our regular meeting is.
So we'll shoot for a light agenda on the 7th.
That's a combined,
No,
On the
No.
24th.
24th is combined,
correct.
7th is not. You're welcome to come as budget meeting, and then it goes to the budget committee for the 13th, I believe. Yes, Monday the 13th.
okay.
Sorry, Don. Just wanted to make sure I was the right schedule.
Well, I was really pumped up and ready to go. It threw my rhythm off a little bit, but,
Sorry.
God,
but I'm
here we
back.
go.
Good.
All right, here we go. Ready?
Let's see it.
So, this Friday, the 13th, nomination papers are available for 1 seat on the Board of Selectmen, 3 on the Budget Finance for a 3-year term, and 1 seat on the RSU 14 board. That same evening, Friday, March 13th at 6 p.m., will be a first, hopefully annual, 4th of July celebration committee meeting. We're going to be at the Public Safety Department, Danielle and I going, and encourage anybody who's interested in helping to develop this new town event to come to that inaugural meeting.
What was the date?
March
That's
15th.
Friday,
Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th. And I guess if you want to get fancy with the Revitalization Committee, they're also having a meeting on Thursday, the 12th in the evening
At 6 p.m.
at 6 p.m.
Cal Mexicon.
at La Mexicana. They're experimenting with the evening meeting to see if they can't get better attendance. I mean, the attendance has at times been really good during the day and then other times not as good, so they try a night meeting. So there's a Thursday Revitalization Committee meeting, then a Friday meeting to talk about the 4th of July celebration. Then jumping ahead to Wednesday, March 18th, we have the RSU 14 public hearing on the new funding formula. I think that's the second public hearing. We went to one, right? So then we have on Tuesday, March 24th, the Joint Board of Selectmen Budget Finance Committee Budget Review Meeting at 7 p.m. here. And then as Teresa mentioned, on Wednesday, March 25th, the RSU 14 funding formula vote, 5:30 orientation, or discussion rather, and then 6 p.m. vote. So that's a few of the highlights coming up to a town meeting room near you.
You got anything else, Don?
No.
Wow.
Don't ask him.
I mean, I can tell you that we're happy that it appears that spring has sprung for a couple of days until this weekend, and then Nate will be back doing what Nate does best.
So is it frost heave season? Is that what starts in earnest now that the temperatures start changing?
Frost heaves are here.
They've been started.
The notice was in the paper.
Nate, would you like to say something?
Yes, and our posted road signs are going up on the 16th, which is next Monday. So we are into spring.
They were in the paper already.
Yep, it was advertised in the paper.
And so they'll go up on the 16th, so that means what?
That means anything registered over 23,000 GB, 23,000 registered weight cannot travel the roads with a load. Exception, what's that? Town roads. You'll still be able to travel 85 and 121. The state in the past 3 years has posted Egypt Road.
why, I don't know.
Exceptions, school buses, oil trucks.
Your exceptions are school buses, oil trucks, our trash trucks, that's about it, and emergency vehicles.
If you absolutely have an emergency and you need to get in, it's sometimes possible to get in the early
Yeah,
morning if you
yeah.
have freezing temperatures. Check with Nathan
Correct.
for authorization.
Correct.
Not always possible.
We do what we can to accommodate, try to get people in and out.
Thank you, Nate.
Okay, thanks.
Lonnie?
Excellent. I'd like to make a motion to accept payroll expense summary dated 3/10/2015 for the amount of $44,119.12.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous?
Make a motion to accept treasurer's warrant dated 3/10/2015 for the amount of $65,538.94.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous?
Do you need a motion on the next one?
I do, if you want to read all those 50 numbers.
Yep, I make a motion to go into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA section 405-6A.
Now you got to read the
Oh,
explanation.
continuation of town manager evaluation and consideration of contract extension.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Draft of the town manager for the, a year.
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor? Thank you. Don?
I would just like to thank you all for extending my contract. We've had a great year. I look forward to another successful year. We'll work through this budget. That's going to be a challenge, but I have confidence that on the 24th, as we begin that process, we'll be able to make some great choices for the community and get the budget where the collective elected officials would like to see it. And so I'm excited, enthusiastic about the year ahead, and thank you very much for extending my contract.
You're most welcome, Don. Well deserved.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
All those in favor?